Good morning. It has been a little while, but I am very thankful for Dale coming in and taking over the reins, but I am happy to have an opportunity to speak in front of you again. I hope everyone had a wonderful and Merry Christmas yesterday, and this is the last Sunday of 2021. Next Sunday will be in 2022, and our theme this past year has been being like Jesus. I was actually fortunate enough to be the one who introduced it on the first one, so I kind of get to bookend the year. Pretty exciting time here. So a lot has changed in the last year, obviously, in the world and here in Laurel with Dale coming in. But I did want to go back to our theme and try to do the best I can to wrap up and talk a little bit about being like Jesus. This morning, we're going to look at three different passages. You've heard of a 3-point sermon. We're going to do 3-passage sermon. And I appreciate Danny reading the first one. It was the longest. That's why I gave it to him. But we're going to look at some familiar stories, some passages we know fairly well. And we're going to look at some common themes and see how Jesus dealt with people, how he interacted with those that we're going to talk about. And we're going to look at some situations where these people were struggling, where these people were not physically broken, but probably spiritually and emotionally broken. The first being the woman at the well. And then we're going to also read from Luke chapter 19 next. So you're going to turn there. We'll be in Luke chapter 19. We're going to look at the story of Zacchaeus, which is in Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. He entered Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was and was unable because of the crowd, for he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree in order to see him, for he was about to pass through that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house." And he hurried and came down and received him gladly. When they saw it, they all began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to the guest of a man who was a sinner." Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, half of my possessions I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will give back 4 times as much." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is the son of Abraham." The third passage I'd like to turn to is in John chapter 8. John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him. And he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. And having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say?" They were saying this, testing him, so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground. But when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone and the woman where she was in the center of the court. Straightening up, Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I do not condemn you either. Go, from now on, sin no more." So we're going to look at these 3 passages, and they're all, like I said, common, well-known passages. And you may have heard, or at least I know I have, multiple sermons on each of them. You know, we've gone fairly in-depth on all 3 of these passages, and that's not going to be the intention today. We're going to look at more of these on the face, look at how Jesus dealt with these people, and maybe some common themes about how Jesus interacted with them and what we can do when we interact with people. And the first point I'd like to make is that Jesus showed care and concern for the person first. In all three cases, when you look at the subject other than Jesus in these passages, society had deemed this person as lesser, had deemed them as perhaps evil or unclean. And society had marked these people with those labels, but Jesus showed them concern before anything else. Now, they all had issues, right? They all had problems, they all had concerns, but Jesus, in none of these cases, starts with them. It reminded me of a Teddy Roosevelt quote that said, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And I think that concept, that philosophy is present in Scripture. When you look at when Paul is talking about love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, in the very beginning, as he's leading into the love is patient, love is kind, he says in verse 2, "If I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all the faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing." The knowledge, the wisdom, even the faith without love is nothing. Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think it's important to look at Jesus in these interactions and understand that in the context, in the society that he was in, and perhaps even now, his treatment of them would seem absurd. His treatment of them would be abnormal. It would definitely be revolutionary. Because he showed care and concern for the people first. And Jesus connected with the needy and the oppressed. He consistently cared for those who were afflicted. And in these cases, and in many others, it was regardless of why they were so. It didn't matter why they were in the situation they were. We talked a couple weeks ago in class about the labels we wear. And when you think about the labels that these people either had attached to them or wore, you think about Samaritan, about divorcee, tax collector, adulteress, sinner. They wore these labels, and Jesus went right past them. He went right past these barriers to communication and to care, and he went right to the soul and the person underneath. And there's a sense in the world, and I think we'd be naive if we said it didn't bleed into the church, that some deserve empathy, some deserve help, and others do not because of their own choices. And I think we can look at all three of these passages and understand that all three of these people made questionable choices. We can call it questionable. It would be bad. And Jesus cared for them anyway. And the people around Jesus didn't understand this. When you look at the passage from Zacchaeus in verse 7, when the people saw that he was going to Zacchaeus' house, they all began to complain, saying, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." They didn't understand how he could willingly go into this situation, to be surrounded by these people, to care and show concern for these people. And so many times, those that are broken, those that are struggling, those that are downtrodden with life or with sin, they can feel alone, dejected, unloved by the world, and yes, sometimes the church. But Jesus calls us to be different. Jesus calls us to love the least. Remember, when he's separating the right from the left, the sheep from the goats, whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done to me, or whatever you have not done to the least of these. We're to see Jesus in the downtrodden, in the oppressed, in the afflicted. And again, the reason why they are in such a position is irrelevant to our care. And Jesus modeled this. When you look in Mark chapter 2 at the calling of Matthew, here called Levi, and starting in verse 14, as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting in the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And it happened that he was reclining at the table in his house, and many tax collectors and sinners were dining with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many of them, and they were following him. When the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with the sinners and the tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why is he eating with tax collectors and sinners?" And hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not those that are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." If we are to be like Jesus, if we want to live our lives being like Christ, we're to understand how he treated the broken. We're to understand and appreciate how he treated the afflicted. When we act like we have it all right, when we act like we know and these heathens need to get in line, we not only lose efficacy in our purpose, we lose the heart of Jesus' message. That Jesus came to seek and save the lost. He came to love those that killed him. And again, I can only assume from the years I've been attending that sometimes our fear with this message, our fear with the message of love mitigates the danger of sin. And maybe this is not how you're feeling, but I feel like I almost have to speak to it because I can hear it sometimes. Well, we don't want to discount the sin here, right? We don't want to say it's okay the way these people are living their lives. And my response is, I feel like in those cases we're limiting the power of Christ's love. Jesus brought these people into his love, and it was a transformative, a life-altering experience for them. If you skip to the end of any of these stories, their life was changed. And Jesus showed love and concern first. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, at the end of his speaking of love, tells us that love believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. It's why love is the greatest commandment, that we're to love God first and love others second. Because love is transformative. When we come in contact with God's love, it changes us. And it can do the same for others. When we show them the love and concern of Christ, it changes them. We don't need to worry about changing them and then bringing them into love. Let the love do the changing. It's the most powerful thing. Paul tells us, Jesus tells us that. And frankly, I'm beyond thankful that Jesus deals with us this way. I'm glad he doesn't keep records of wrongs. I'm glad that he loves me regardless, because even when I'm trying to do my best, I still make mistakes. And I'm glad that his love is constantly changing me, transforming me, making me better. And the more he loves me, the more I love others, and the circle goes round and round. I truly believe that this is what the emotionally and spiritually broken need to hear. It's what Jesus did for them. When we look at how Jesus dealt with those that were broken, those that were struggling. I think about the woman at the well. And you know how when you dive into that story, why was she going in the middle of the day? Nobody goes in the middle of the day. Because of the shame that she felt, the isolation she felt. And I think about how Jesus, just speaking to this woman as a Jewish man, was uplifting to her. How treating her as a human was building her up, was showing her concern. And I think about how that changed her. And I believe that this message is twofold. I feel that most of us at one point or another feel broken. We feel lost. We struggle. And if we're dealing with shame, we're dealing with isolation, we're dealing with regret, Christ is there for us and loves us. I feel like that's a message we all need to hear. And if we're going to be like Jesus, if we're going to try to live a life like Christ, this is how we interact with others. This is how we treat those that are struggling. This is how we treat those that are broken. So as we try to live our lives like Christ, as we try to follow the example that he left us, I think it's so important how we deal not just with those that we feel are good people, fellow Christians, but how we deal with those that are struggling. Because Jesus surrounded himself by sinners, and his love transformed them. Again, I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I hope that this theme, just like our other themes that we've had over the past couple years, doesn't end this week. I think being like Christ, and I know this is not a revolutionary statement. I hope being like Christ is something we try to do every day, every year. But I think focusing on it and really thinking about it and looking at the situations in our lives and saying, how would Christ handle this? What would Jesus do? I think that changes us. I think that mindset is something we continually need to reevaluate. And I think looking how Jesus dealt with people helps us deal with people. If there's anything we can do for you this morning, if you're feeling lost or broken or dejected, we want to be here for you because we want to be like Christ. Or if there's anything the church can do for you, we encourage you to please come forward as we stand and sing.